Good afternoon. Well, I am so delighted to be here. Google is really one of my favorite places to work and to talk. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about what I call the contribution gap and our personal brands. So a few years ago, I had a 6-month period, and in that 6-month period, I left a long marriage after a couple of decades and got a divorce. All within 6 months. My stepfather dropped dead. My stepfather died of a lung disease. My father dropped dead after a heart attack 2 weeks later. I moved from California to New York and then back to California again. And as one of my friends said, you know how there's those scales of things you're not supposed to do because they can kill you? There's things like move or a death in the family. They increase your rate of death. She said, you're not supposed to do even one of them, let alone all 6 of them in a short period of time. And so it really made me stop. And I had to stop, and I had to step back, and I had to take a look at what did I want the next period of my life to be? What really was my contribution in the next period of my life? And so I went on this year-long research project about what is really at the heart of our contribution? What is really at the heart of our personal brands? And what I want to share with you today is what I found out in that year. Because what I found out in that year really changed my own personal brand. It changed how I think about things. It changed how I work. It changed how I work with clients. And I found that in that research that I did, there's a lot we can learn about our brands and our contribution that isn't always the way that we talk about them. And so that's what I want to talk about with you today. I want to share what I learned in that research with you today. The first thing I want to ask you to do, I know everyone sat down, but the first thing I'd love to ask everybody to do is just to stand up for 1 minute. And I just sat down, but stand up for 1 minute. And what I'd like you to do is say hello to 1 or 2 people around you, only here's the catch. Say hello like you're really looking for someone a lot more important to say hello to. All right? So if everybody would just do that for a minute. Go ahead and say hello. All right. Now, would you please say hello to somebody next to you or around you, but say hello like they're your long-lost friend and you're thrilled to have found them again. All right, stop. Very good. Thank you, and have a seat. So, you know how in that first one, it was a little bit like, meh, so-so. In the second one, the volume, I saw many more hugs in the second one, right? And the volume goes up. I think when we have a really strong idea of our personal brand, when we have a really strong idea of what we contribute, it's much easier to connect with other people. It's almost like we walk into the room with that, because that sense of connection is much more palatable. And it isn't that it's bad, the first experience. It's just a little sort of empty. And what I call that is the contribution gap. When we're really clear about our brand, when we're really clear about our contribution, then what we have is a way to instantly almost connect with other people, whether these are people at a conference, whether they're people we work with, whether they're people in a social situation. It gives us that sense of what our contribution is. We walk in with that. And so what I studied in that year that I had was what the contribution gap was in my own life and what the contribution gap was in other people's lives. And one of the things I found in my research is one of the things that gets in the way of our brands being the strongest and our contribution, making our greatest contribution, is what I call the myth of roles. And this is all the I ams in our life. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a software engineer. I am a dancer, right? I am a cat lover. I am a dog lover. I'm a fan of Game of Thrones. Whatever your I ams are, whatever your roles are. And so I discovered that these roles really are one of the things that get in the way of our contribution. And for some of you, like, what are some of the roles that you have? You can just shout it out. Some of the roles that you have, personal or professional. Daughter, exactly. What else? Husband, yes. What else? Roommate, exactly. Googler, yes, very important role. But what's the problem with all roles eventually? What happens to all roles eventually? They end, right? By their nature, all roles eventually end. And so if we think our contribution or the heart of our contribution is about our roles, then what happens is when they end, we find ourselves going, well, who am I? What is it that I have to contribute? That's a lot of what happened when my father died and I stopped being my father's daughter. I was still my mother's daughter, but when I stopped being my father's daughter, or when I got a divorce and I was now not someone's wife, and all of these roles, and I wasn't a Californian anymore, and so all these roles started to change, and I started to say, well, if I'm not all of that, who am I? So one of the things that gets in the way of our personal brands and our contributions is this myth of the roles, who we think we are. The other thing I discovered in my research, and by the way, I interviewed several thousand people all over the world in different companies, and male, female, despite age, race, gender, it didn't matter. What I found was there was a lot of commonalities. And the other commonality was this myth of knowledge and results. A lot of us define our brands and our contribution by the results we produce or what we know. The writer Gretchen Cryer calls that, I know the worlds of. So what are the worlds that we know, right? Like you might know the worlds of volleyball, or the world of travel, or the world of Google, or the world of speaking French, or the world of dogs. There's a million worlds that you can know. And all of that is part of our brand, but that's not the heart of our contribution or the heart of our brand. And so the other thing I found in my research is that people often get very stifled because they think that their brand or they think that their contribution are these worlds that they know. So if it's not those two things, what is it? Well, here's what I found in my research. I found that our brands and our contribution, at the heart of them is what I call the weather you bring with you. It's the thing when you walk into the room, it just comes with you. It's the thing that people feel from us. It's the thing that people can sense about us and feel from us the moment they walk into a room without knowing anything about us. So I'll give you an example of this. I was walking in the Lower East Side of Manhattan about a year ago with a friend, and we see this woman, a traffic cop, and she's directing traffic. And she isn't just directing traffic, she's doing it like it's ballet. Now, I have the greatest respect for New York City traffic cops. That is a hard job. But a lot of them often have a look on their face like, this would be a great job if it wasn't for all those people driving cars. And this woman is leaping and she's jumping and she's going, come on, sir, go this way. Ladies, cross the street. She is so alive and so enthusiastic. And we're all the pedestrians are standing there like this. Wow. Like we're just watching this, and the cars are honking at her and waving. And she is this great example of bringing the weather you bring with you. She has just got this aliveness and this joy. And she's making this amazing contribution. And of course, she's completely establishing her brand by what she's doing, right? But she's doing it in this really enthusiastic, excited way. And cars are honking. And the thing that was amazing about this woman was, did she know she had a solid role as like a traffic cop? Yes, I'm sure she did. Was she knowledgeable? Yes, I'm sure she was knowledgeable in all things traffic laws. But it wasn't her role or her knowledge that was making a difference. It was the way she was doing it. It was the weather that she was bringing with her that was making a difference. And in the work that I did and in the research that I did, I actually found that there's some archetypes or there's some ways that people typically contribute. And I call these brand energies or brand archetypes. These are, and there were 12 of them. I actually could identify and find 12 core brand archetypes of how we approach our personal brands and how we contribute. And the interesting thing about these brand energies is all of us have access to all these energies, right? Any of us can step into any of these at any time. But usually there's one or two that when we look back to being kids, we can see that way, way, way back, we had this. This is something that we had even as kids. This has always, in a way, been what we bring to the party. It's been the weather that we bring with us. And so I wanted to go through these 12 archetypes with you because I want you to think about, as I go through them, where do you see yourself, but where do you see the people that you work with? Because one of the other things I found in the research was that the best marriages, the best teams, the best departments, the best problem-solving groups, all of those people had people with different contribution styles, with different brand energies, that it wasn't just one. That when you had people with a mix, when you had more of a diversity of contribution style, things went a lot better because people brought different things to the party. So I'm going to go through the 12 that I discovered with you. Now, for the overachievers in here who are like, no, I'm not just one or two, I'm all 12. Fine, you can be all 12. But generally, you'll notice as I go through that you usually tend to be leaning more in the direction of one or the other. And that's important. It's important to know which ones you are, because then you can invite other people to the party and to be on teams with you and to work with you who are different, who actually bring a different kind of energy and contribution. And when you're putting teams together, you can consciously think about, how am I going to have this team reflect all of those different kinds of energies, or at least a mix, so it's not just one type. So here was one of them. These are people whose whether they bring with them, their contribution is the fixer. And the fixer is the person that's the healer, they're a restorer, they're the mender. These are the people that you give when a problem needs to be solved, because you know that that's the thing that they love. My friend Joanne used to talk about her dad, who was in real estate, and she'd say, her father would come into work every morning, he'd sit down at his desk, he'd roll up his sleeves, he'd get his cup of coffee out, and he'd literally say, okay, what problems do we have today? And he was excited. He was excited to see what problems showed up. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not go into my office every morning and go, wow, what problems do we have today? It tends not to be my relationship with problems. I have other things I do, but not that. So fixers love problems. That's one of the things that's in that archetype. They're really those kind of people. Useful people to have on a team, useful energy to have, because those people are able to literally take that attitude towards making something better and solve it. Then you have people that are facilitators. And this archetype is people that are mediators and moderators and go-betweens. You know, these are the people that are able to take all these different groups and different people and get them aligned and going in the same direction. Amazing skill to have, right? Amazing contribution to make. Then you have people that are storytellers, right? And storytellers are these narrators and orators and minstrels. These are the people, whether it's through writing or whether it's through painting or whether it's through video or whether it's through dance or whether it's through theater, these are the people that are able to convey this emotion and this feeling through story. And those are incredibly important people to have in our world and in our life and on our teams, because when you have that brand of being a storyteller, when that's the weather you bring with you, you're able to translate all of these things in a way that's very powerful. You know, one of the things that I learned in my research was that metaphor and stories was one of the best way to get your point across to somebody. That when you could speak in metaphors and stories, people were able to hear it in a much different way than when it was just pure, straight facts and figures. Then you have people that are synthesizers, and people who the weather they bring with them is synthesizers and the energy that they bring with them. These are the integrators and the blenders and the producers. You know, these are the people that are able to take all these disparate things, put them together and create something new. And those synthesizers are people that we rely on because they're able to see something new in all of the different elements. And it's a really wonderful, rich archetype and a really wonderful and rich brand energy, because bringing all those things together is often the thing that transforms it. You know, from a caterpillar to a butterfly, transforms it into something brand new and beautiful. Then you have people that are mentors, and the mentors are interesting because these are the people whose contribution, their real essence of their brand is being advisors and teachers and guides. And I love this picture. This is actually a photo that I took at I think it's the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I was visiting with some friends and their kids, and this little kid saw one of these minions, and the look on this child's face was like he had just seen God. And he wandered, and the parents there, you know, and the kid wanders up to the minion, and you can see the way he's just kissing the minion and looking at him. But often our relationship with mentors is we look up to them and we admire them so much because it's the people with this energy, they're the people that are really shepherding us along and helping us make our goals and helping us be the best people that we can be. And so this mentor energy is incredibly important and valuable as a contribution. That's the thing about all these archetypes. One isn't better than the other. One is not more useful than the other. One isn't more desirable than the other. They're all useful, and that's why when you have teams or groups or people that have a mix of them together, you tend to get a better result because you're getting all of these different energies together. You're getting all of these different archetypes, which you can see you really need to produce the best outcome, and really owning the archetype that we are, really owning what our contribution is and being certain about our contribution and really making it is a big part of people who have strong personal brands. They know to the depth of their being what that contribution is, and they trust it. They trust their own contribution. That is what I found in my research, was these people were very solid in what their contribution was. It doesn't mean they couldn't step into other energies, but they really saw the depth of that contribution. Then you have people that are connectors. These are some of my favorite kinds of energies, is people that are connectors. And these are the networkers and the arrangers and the coordinators. These are the people that you'll go to a party and they'll go, hey, you should know such and such, and I'm going to do an email and introduce you to this person because you two should talk to each other about this, that, and the other thing. They're always putting people together, right? And the people they put together magically seem to be perfect for each other in terms of the contribution they can make to each other. Then you have people that are visionaries, and the visionaries are the conceptualizers and the idealists and the dreamers. And these are the people that are able to see something and actually come up with the concept of what it should be, right? These are the people that are actually able to stop and go, we're doing it this way, but maybe we could do it that way. You know, this is sort of this ideal that I have. Then we have people that are motivators, and motivators are a little bit different than mentors. They might mentor, but motivators are those people that can light a fire under us, right? They're the cheerleaders and the influencers and the persuaders. These are the people that really can get a group of people going on a team, in a group, individually, with friends. These are the people that they just walk in the door, and what they bring with them is this instant sort of cheeriness and influence and ability to persuade. Then you have the people that are the makers, and these are the artisans and the creators and the inventors. And these people could be creating code, or they could be creating paintings. I have this thing I talk about as the everyday artist. One of the things I discovered in my research was everyone is what I call an everyday artist. Every single person has something about what they do that's art. Doesn't matter if they're computer coding, it doesn't matter if they're a doctor, it doesn't matter if they're a painter. Everyone has something that they do that a part of it is their art. It's the way they do it where they're creating. And these people literally are driven by inventing and creating an art. That's their whole world. It's not just painting, it's not just being on stage. It could be, I've known people that are artisans, that's their makers, that's their essential self, their essential contribution, and what they're making is code, or what they're making are products. But it's that feeling of that they're creating. Then you have people that are advocates, and these are the people that are the activists and the champions and the campaigners. These are the people that you invite to a dinner party, and they can't help it. They're going to talk about what they're passionate about and what they're advocating for, no matter what, even at a dinner party. That's their energy that they bring with them. Then you have people that are implementers, and these are achievers and administrators and executors. These people are awesome because it's one thing to have ideas, it's another thing, right, to have those ideas actually get implemented. And so these people are really amazing at taking something from a concept and an idea and making it happen. Then you have people that are interpreters, and these are the people that are able to translate and change and transform an idea or a group of ideas and interpret it in a way that something completely new happens, that something completely new occurs, because they're able to take all those different parts and not only synthesize them, but interpret them in a totally new and different way. So what gets in the way of those things, right? Those are some of our contributions and archetypes. What gets in the way of them? Well, the first thing is do you know what yours is? Can you have a sense of what your archetype is? Actually, what I'd love everybody to do is just kind of quickly pair up with someone next to you. And of those ones that I just ran through, which one or two do you think you are? Which one resonates most strongly with you? And then which one or two reminded you of someone you know? So everybody just get a partner and really quickly, just sort of with your partner, share what that is. Great. So let me just hear some examples of which one resonated with you personally. Which ones resonated with you personally? Let me just hear some examples.
I would say a visionary.
Visionary? Okay, great. Who else?
I'd say an implementer.
An implementer? Okay. See, now what's interesting is if we put these two together, they're a perfect pair, right? Because we have the vision and then we have implementation. What happens when you have a team just of all visionaries? They're happy, they're excited, but nothing gets done because they're not implementers. What happens when you have a team of all implementers?
They can go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, they're awesome at getting it done, but they could be going in the wrong direction, or they could be going in a limited direction. Which is why we need everyone's contribution. Which is why this diversity of contribution is really, really important. Why it's important to have this inclusion of different people who have different contributions to bring in teams and groups, etc. Who else? Let me just hear a few other examples over here. Yeah. There's connectors? You're all like together. The connectors are all connected. Okay, perfect. You managed to find each other. Great. So how many of you could see your coworkers in this? Just raise your hands. Yep, your bosses, your wives. Anybody see their animals? Every once in a while people say to me, I think my dog's a connector. I'm like, okay. So what gets in the way of this? Well, one of the things I found in the research was that one of the big things that gets in the way, that creates a contribution gap, is our fear of missing out. You know, and we live in a world where it's easier than ever to have this fear of missing out, isn't it? Because every time we turn on, you know, the iPhone or the thing, or the Google, whatever we're using, whatever PDA we're using, the Google, the iPhone, whatever, every time we turn it on, what happens? We look at Facebook and we see, oh, that person's living so much of a better life than I am. They're having so much more fun than I am. Doesn't everyone's life look so much better than ours? Come on. Tell the truth. Do you know, it's like I'm always looking and going, well, wow, Kim Kardashian didn't retweet my picture of my macaroni and cheese. How come? I want to be the mother of dragons, you know. So what happens is we have this fear of missing out that happens in part. Social media's been wonderful for a lot of things, and I love it, but it's also contributed to this fear of missing out. It's contributed to this idea that somehow everybody's living this better life than we are. And the fear of missing out was one of the things that my research showed really got in the way of people's contribution. And it also created a sense of isolation. It created a sense of, I'm sort of here in my world doing my thing, and other people are in their world doing their thing, and we're not really always connecting. Even though we might be connected on social, we're not always connecting. So what I found in the research was that this fear of missing out led to a sense of emptiness that had people not really believe or have faith in their contribution. Like their contribution wasn't enough. Their contribution was somehow insufficient or not enough to bring to the party. That's one of the things that gets in the way. So how do you bridge that gap? Well, I think you bridge that gap a couple of the ways. And one of the ways you bridge it is by practicing what my friend Lynette calls the joy of missing out. So instead of the fear of missing out, you practice the joy of missing out. I love Lynette because I will say to her, Lynette, do you want to go to the movie? And she'll go, yeah, no, I don't really feel like doing that. And I'll go, okay, well, Lynette, do you want to do this? No, I don't think so. It's not that Lynette doesn't participate. She just isn't afraid of missing out on things. So she really has that joy of not doing things. And how many times do we do something because we have a fear of missing out on it? We're just afraid to say no because we might miss this opportunity or we might miss this person or something might happen. You know, a few years ago, I love to travel. Travel is one of my most favorite things in the world to do. And a few years ago, I got invited to go with a girlfriend. A friend of mine was going to go to Iceland. And she had a small group of people put together, some friends. So I decided to go to Iceland. I'd never been there to see the Northern Lights. Now, I know that Iceland is cold, but I thought Iceland was cold the way New York is cold. And what I found out is, no, Iceland is not cold the way New York is cold. It's much, much colder. So I, as a result, was not properly dressed in Iceland, and I think it was in the winter too. So I was not properly dressed in Iceland, and I looked good, but I was really cold. And I was so cold that I actually got violently sick, like seriously sick in Iceland. And so I spent most of my time in bed with a cold recovering. It was just one of those trips that nothing turned out, right? Rarely happens when I travel, but nothing turned out. And so I got home from Iceland and I was like, okay, that's it. And Lynette and I have a good friend named Teresa, and Teresa said to me, maybe a week after I got back from Iceland, Karen, a bunch of us are gonna go on a trip. Do you wanna come with us? And I was like, hell no. And I think I said something else, but I said, hell no, I do not want to go on that trip. And they were like, oh no, it'll really be fun. It's going to be an interesting thing. But I was like, no, I don't want to go on the trip. It was overseas somewhere. And then about 3 months or 4 months goes by, and Teresa's talking to me about their trip. And I go, and I literally say to her, what do you mean you guys are going on the trip? How come you didn't invite me? And she goes, we did invite you. You said hell no. And I said, oh, I must have been in my post-Iceland. She goes, yeah, you were in your post-Iceland phase. You were not feeling like going on that trip. So anyway, they all went on the trip, and they were sending me pictures from the bus, and they're all having a good time. And I started feeling like that fear of missing out, like, darn it, I missed out. I missed out on going on that trip. And then all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I didn't go on that trip, but the country they went to isn't going anywhere. I didn't go on that trip, but you know what? Look at all these other things I got to do because I didn't go on that trip. And I started to see how even in retrospect, we look at things and we have this fear of missing out about things that have already passed. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? And then we spend our mind like, oh, I should have gone to that meeting, or I should have been at that party, or I should have done this thing. And so this fear of missing out, the alternative, the key to really giving our contribution is to step into the joy of missing out. It's like really practicing that if something isn't the right thing for us at the time, we're gonna have the joy of missing out on it. We're gonna have the joy of saying no to the things that aren't right and saying yes to the things that are right. So I have a contribution challenge for you, and here's the challenge. It's really in the next month, only do things that are really within your greatest contribution. Only do things that are really on the path of your greatest contribution. Only say yes to those things that really feel like they're within your gift, the gift that you have to give. Now, obviously, there's things your boss is going to ask you to do that you can't say, oh, I'm sorry, that's not within my gift or my contribution. I won't be doing that. Yeah, don't do that. But you know, there's other things that you're going to want to say yes to that really aren't there out of a fear of missing out. Just say no to those things, because saying no to those things has a certain power to it that makes a huge difference when you start moving in that direction. So that's one of the things I found is when people took on this contribution challenge, it made a huge difference. The other thing is that take a look at how you're represented in terms of your brand in the world. So what does that mean? Number one, in business, that means LinkedIn. Take a look at your LinkedIn profile and see, it doesn't really represent me. I get calls every day from people that ask me to work with them on their personal brand. First thing I do is check out their LinkedIn profiles. And as many of you know, your LinkedIn profile is a lot of people, like up to 77% of the people that are going to talk to you or work with you are going to check you out on LinkedIn first. So having your LinkedIn profile really reflect and represent you is one of the key things to having your brand in the world be solidified. You know, I always tell people they should be Googling themselves at least once a month. You just put your name in on Google and Google yourself once a month and see what comes up. You know, how are you being represented in the world? So your LinkedIn is one of the places you want to think about how are you representing your brand. Are you just giving a recitation of your everything you've done, of your resume, or are you actually having a little bit of there in the summary of who you are and what you contribute? I don't mean writing the archetypes in there. I mean talking a little bit about what you're committed to, talking a little bit about what it is you bring to the party. You know, I always tell people their summaries ought to have a little bit of that feeling of what's the weather you bring with you. When that's in your summary in your in your LinkedIn, excuse me, then it makes a big difference. People can get a sense of that. So one is, are you represented on your LinkedIn in a way where your brand really shows up? Because in the world we live in today, that's one of the places people go. I don't know if you all have seen this yet, but you know, now on my calendar, on my cell, when I go to meet with somebody I haven't met with before, a little message will pop up that says, you're going to meet with such and such soon. Would you like to see their LinkedIn profile? So it's automatically taking me to see people's LinkedIn profile when I'm meeting with someone I haven't met with before, or it doesn't recognize as someone I know. So that's going to be just standard. I think in about a year, that's going to just be built into every calendar program everywhere, regardless of what you're using. So that kind of access to people is part of how our brands are getting defined. So how do you show up online? What's your LinkedIn look like? That's the reason LinkedIn's important, is because it's the business-to-business one. It's the biggest business-to-business one. But then how are you represented on Facebook? Listen, I know people who have stuff on Facebook, pictures, shots of taking tequila shots as they get out of the ocean half dressed, right? Really saying really inflammatory things politically on both sides of the aisle, doesn't matter, right? I have people that have stuff on their Facebook that I'm saying, do you want an employer to really see that? Do you want a potential client you're meeting with to really see that? Because that's shaping their narrative about you, and they can find it. So part of it is thinking about how also do we represent ourselves online. You know, I think we've gotten really loose about just putting anything online we want on Facebook or Twitter. And while there's a certain freedom to that, a freedom of expression, there's also a certain consequence in terms of how it shapes our brand in the world. So it's thinking about the social media and how are you represented in social media. And then the other thing is thinking about what what I call these are brand projects. What projects do you take on at work? Right? What projects do you say yes to that can help shape your brand, and what projects do you say no to because they're really not on your path? Oftentimes we don't look for those brand projects, and we need to. We need to look for projects at work that help us shape that brand. You know, and then there's other ways to start to build your brand, whether it's a podcast, or it's blogging, or it's writing, or it's doing articles, or it's speaking on panels. Everyone today, for their own career, has to start to think about, what is my strategy for managing my personal brand? Obviously, you have to take a few things into account. One is, what do the policies of your company let you do? You know, there's some limitations usually with companies about what we can do. So given that you're operating within those policies, what are you going to do? The other thing is, what are your gifts? If you're a great writer, then you should probably be doing some writing. You should probably be blogging somewhere, or at least contributing to some articles if you're a great writer. If you're a great speaker, maybe you should be doing a podcast or being interviewed on a podcast for your expertise or your area. Right? If you're really a good speaker, maybe you should be on a panel for a conference for your area. Those are the kinds of things that you want to start to think about building, because they take your contribution from being something abstract to something tangible. And it's one thing for us to know what our contribution is and feel it. It's another thing to make it tangible in our companies and in the world. And so it's really on us to make sure we're shaping our brands out in the world in a way where people can get it. And by the way, when I say shaping our brands, I don't mean lying, exaggerating, making things up. I'm not a fan of any of that. I'm talking about the authentic expression of who we are and what's effective for us. But too many people I see really don't take enough effort to shape their brand. One, they think they maybe don't need to because of the level they're at. Two, they don't think they need to because they're already gainfully employed and they're not looking for another job. But the reality is those things do start to shape our brand. I'll give you one really simple example. This was years ago. A friend of mine told me this story. She used to work in a company with a woman, and the woman was, you know, like a mid-level manager in a Fortune 500 company. Her name was Susan. And Susan would get in the elevator, and oftentimes just because of the floor she was on and the timing of her meetings, she would often find herself in the elevator with the CEO of the company. She'd say, Susan, how are you today? I'm fine. How are you? It's good. How's everything going? It's good. Oh, it was a little rainy today. Oh, it was snowing today. And that was the degree of their conversation. And then Susan started working on her personal brand, and she said one day she realized that how she must seem to the CEO is like the weather girl. Because every time he asked her how she was, that's what she talked about. So she started to get in the elevator, and he would say, Susan, how are you today? And she goes, I'm great. And he'd go, really, that's good. And she'd go, yeah, my team and I are working on a really fabulous project. And every time she saw the CEO, she would just do a little bit like that. And within a few months, she said she had been invited to be on a task team that he was running for a major initiative in the organization. Because she reshaped his experience of her. He reshaped his experience of her brand. So while we're not trying to do anything, again, that's exaggerating or lying, we're trying to be authentic. It's important to be authentic in our brands. We have to do it in a way where other people can get it. If they can't get it and get the message, there's no real point to it. So just remember that it's not enough for you to know what the weather is you bring with you. You have to translate it into ways that the people you work with, that the people in the outside world can actually see, can actually feel. That starts to create that narrative about yourself. So here's the thing I want to leave you with. It's not what you know that's important, it's knowing what's important. That's what makes a difference, is knowing what's important. It's not the script that you follow, it's really the script that you write for yourself. And lastly, it isn't really the weather you find, but the weather you bring with you that makes the biggest difference. So thank you very much for your time and your attention. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to take some questions. So please, anybody have any questions about anything, about any aspect of personal branding? And I think we have mics right there, right? Is that where the mics are? Okay, fantastic. Yes, please.
So you talk about like kind of projecting internally what you bring, but I was just wondering if you have any advice around just understanding what you're projecting to other people. So I think like we can know ourselves very well, but knowing also what other people see and getting feedback on that to make sure that we're...
Yeah, that's a great question, because here's what happens, is it's like you said, we think we know how we're coming across, but I always say you can't see the inside of your own eyelids. Right? It's really hard to tell. So I think one of the things, there's a couple of ways to do that. One is to have people that you trust, and you trust not only their the way they look at you, their ability to see you, but you trust that they'll be honest with you, and you can ask them, how do you think I came across in that meeting? What do you think my brand is? One of the things I always tell all new clients to do is I tell them to go talk to 6 people they know and say, if you had to just give me a few descriptions of what you think my personal brand are, what are they? And people often come back and go, they're shocked at how consistent it is. That's what people are shocked at, is how do 6 different people from 6 different places know that? The shortcut to this, by the way, is ask your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend, because they always know. They always know. So that's one thing, is really what is you can ask the people that you know. You can also be more formal, and actually when you get your 360s or when you do something like that, you can ask people to give you their impression of what your personal brand is as an additional sort of piece of that. But it is important to get that feedback. The thing is, you have to establish a relationship with people where they're going to be honest about giving you that feedback. And that means no consequences. So you have to say to people, you can say anything that you really see, and there will be no consequences. I won't hold it against you. I won't bring it up, etc. That's one really good way to do it. Yeah, thank you. What else? Other questions? Yes.
I got one. What about people, I've seen a lot lately, people that rebrand their name, their own name themselves. So I see a lot of executives that all of a sudden their signatures signed off with a shorter, different name. I've got friends that are lawyers that now call themselves slightly different versions of their name because they think, like for example, one like her name's Kate. She now calls herself Katie, and everyone has to call herself Katie. Like, what's your take on? I think like our executive teams seem to do this branding training, and then they've all got different names. Like, what's your take on like I've always thought, like you can't choose, like you can't. People, it has to be organic.
It's like your parents gave you that name,
yeah,
stick with it.
With the it doesn't feel authentic. So like, do you teach that, or like, what's your take on that?
No, what's your name?
My name's Brent.
Brent, because we could make you the big B.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't generally teach that people change their name unless they have a name that's problematic. So I had a woman who called me, and her company was named, no kidding, ISIS. And it was a healthcare company. And she called me because she was very upset, because she says, I've had this name of my company for 20 years and I don't want to change it. I'm like, look, I'm sorry, but there's just no way around this one. You are going to have to change the name of your company. So are there times when you have to change your name? Yes. But I'm not in general a fan. I'm not criticizing anyone if that's what they want to do. That's fine. I don't think that's really what rebranding is about. To me, that's kind of a shallow way to rebrand. I think what real rebranding is about is when you've discovered, it's like I used to have a friend that used to say, before you can have a new reputation, you have to be responsible for the reputation you have currently. So to me, what real rebranding is when you realize you have a certain reputation and it's not what you want, and it's time to really make some deep changes in yourself and externally to that. So I think sometimes people do, and I don't know any of these people, so I'm not saying they've done that, but I think sometimes what people do is they try to fix their brand with a name change or a logo change, or just changing, like I used to wear blue jackets, now I'm wearing red jackets. And all of that's fine, but that isn't really what makes an impact. That isn't really the depth of branding that really makes a difference. So I think the problem is when we try to rebrand in a shallow way, or we try to rebrand just on the surface, I guess would be a better way to say it. When we try to brand on the surface, it lacks a certain impact and depth, and you run the risk of seeming inauthentic. And that's the problem with that kind of surface rebranding. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a great question. Please.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious if in your research you found like helpful insights about vulnerability, because you're calling us to be authentic, to kind of like put ourselves out there and be more open to scrutiny. So I'm kind of wondering if that surfaced in your research, and how does that play out?
First of all, that's such a great question, and that absolutely surfaced in my research. So how many people here have seen Brene Brown's TEDx talk, the Houston TEDx talk on the power of vulnerability? Anybody seen that in here? If you haven't, I want to highly recommend that. That's a really powerful video, but similar to what Brene Brown is talking about in that video, I found that the people that had the strongest personal brands, positive personal brands, let me qualify it like that, because there can be negative personal brands, but people that had the strongest positive personal brands were people that were seen as being authentic, and what made them authentic was their humility and their vulnerability. So they were willing to say, I made that mistake, I screwed that up, I'm trying to do this, and I failed at it. They didn't look like they were all together, like, oh, I've had it all together and everything's perfect in my life, and, you know, I have 2.7 kids and my marriage is fabulous and don't I look great? They didn't have that. They were really willing to say, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with my kids. I'm struggling with my marriage. I'm struggling in my job. I'm having a trouble with this particular part. I don't mean they were dumping it on people, but they were really, really willing to be authentic and honest and vulnerable about their struggles. How many of you, when you work with somebody or you know somebody who's willing to be authentic with you about their struggles, you actually feel more connected to that person when they share that? How many people have had that experience? Just raise your hands. And it's so funny because I think we're afraid that's going to drive people away. But in my research, what I found is that people who are willing to embrace that vulnerability, that's what made them authentic, and that's what made other people able to connect with them and with their brands. And they were actually more able to make their contribution out of that vulnerability than less able to make it. So yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. What else? Other questions, please.
Hi, my name's Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Kind of a tag-along question to that. At what point is an overshare? Is it an overshare? And at what point are certain like taboo subjects?
Right.
For example, like relationship issues, addiction, something like that.
Right.
What if you want to share that openly and vulnerably?
Right.
But
that is such a great question. Well, one thing is, I'll tell you a little story, which is somebody, when I was writing my last book, the brand mapping strategy book, somebody called me and they told me this story. They told me to go online and look at this thing up. And this woman had been on Facebook and she had been sharing about some guy she had dated the night before, and it was very explicit and whatever. I won't tell you any details. It was because that would be oversharing. It was very explicit. And then somebody else said to her, why are you putting this publicly on Facebook? And she goes, oh no, I thought I was sharing it in the private area. And they go, no, you're sharing it publicly. Everyone can see this. And it became this whole thing. And she actually got fired from her job because her clients saw it. And it was pretty risque stuff. So I think one thing is, I see a lot of sharing on Facebook that when I see it, I cringe. And I go, that's too much information. That's oversharing. Because anybody can see it. A client can see it, an employer can see it. So we used to have this thing we used to say, which is, don't put anything in public, on the Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Don't put anything out there in public you wouldn't want printed on the front page of the New York Times. So when it comes to social media, that's one of the ways to think about it. How would I feel if this was on the front page of the New York Times? Would I be okay with that? If you would be, then put it. If you wouldn't, then don't. I think when it comes to the personal sharing, I think you have to make a distinction. And the distinction is the relationship, the container of the relationship you have with the person. In other words, is this person a coworker, but they're also a friend? And you talk about personal things. I think when there's that container, then it's fine, especially if you have a confidentiality agreement, to share those things with each other. I think when the container is that you're coworkers, but you're not really personal friends, you have to think about, is that information something that's going to burden the person because they're going to feel like they have to keep it from other people, so you're now putting a burden on them? Or is it something that's going to affect their relationship with you in a way that's negative or difficult? So I think part of it is it's really a case-by-case basis, but we have a big problem in today's world with oversharing. I mean, how many of you go on Facebook sometimes and you literally go, why did that person put that on Facebook? You wonder that. How many people of you have wondered that? I mean, I could give you so many more examples, and it's, you know, now we got people showing videos of things, and I'm like, why are they putting that video on Facebook, right? Does that help? Yeah, it's very good. Thank you. Other questions, please.
So I've been thinking a lot about juggling kind of an aspirational personal brand and something that you really actually haven't done yet. I feel like a couple of my peers would say, well, I'm a marathon runner. And you'd say, oh, well, what marathons have you run? Like, well, you know, I'm training for one.
Right.
Or, you know, I'm a community architect. Well, what communities have you built? And so it's not dishonest because there's a genuine desire to get to that, but it just ends up feeling a little shallow and without integrity, even though they do have the skills or they're working towards getting to that brand.
Right.
If that makes sense. So
Right.
How would you recommend kind of working towards something and trying to get yourself into that next step, while not being kind of dishonest and kind of seems like it's lying almost.
It's right. Yes, that's a great question because we have a lot of things get hyped up today, right? We hype things up. Like people say, I'm a writer. Really? Well, what have you written? Well, nothing, but I'm writing. You know, so it's like, I think part of it is we've lost that distinction of what those achievements are. So I think part of it is, you really just said it. It's being honest with people. I don't think you need to say, remember the thing about roles? Marathon runners are role. You don't have to identify yourself by that role to say, God, one of my projects this year is I'm training to run a marathon, right? I'm really into the athletics this year. I'm really trying to have a breakthrough in my athletic ability. I'm training to run a marathon. You don't have to give yourself the label. And I think we are, again, I think part of it is we get into this thing this day where we feel like we have to label everything. I'm a writer. I'm a marathon runner. I'm an artist, whatever it is. And part of it is, if we can let go of the identification with the role, then we can talk about it from the point of view of what we're learning. You know, I'm studying Spanish. You know, I'm learning to run a marathon. You know, what was the other example you gave? Yeah, I'm studying how to be a community architect, or I'm really passionate about community architecture. We don't have to have ourselves in a fixed position as the role. Does that make sense? And part of what happens with social media is we get encouraged to categorize ourselves a lot. We get encouraged to categorize ourselves, like, and check the boxes for all of the different things, like that's what our brand is. And what I'm saying is, our brand isn't really those roles. It's what we bring to it. It's what we contribute. Like, for myself, like, I consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm always going to be learning something. When I was in my 40s, I took up tap dancing. I wasn't very good at it, but I would never say, I'm a tap dancer. No one would ever say that. But I would say to people, yeah, I'm studying tap dancing. It's really fun. I'm learning a lot. Because I didn't have to be identified in the role, right? So it's like, it's a matter of, like right now I'm learning to make jewelry. But I would never say, I would never call myself a jeweler. I could, but I wouldn't, because I don't need to be identified with that role. Right now it's just like, oh, I'm learning something new. I'm learning to make jewelry. How fun. So I think part of it is we want to get everything kind of like boxed down to, these are our 7 roles, and these are the 7 roles are what define who we are. And what I'm saying is the opposite is, the roles aren't really what we are. It's the quality. So maybe the quality for the person running the marathon is challenging themselves. So the thing to talk about is, I love to challenge myself, and my new way I'm challenging myself is I'm learning to run marathons. Does that make sense? Because then you're focusing on the quality rather than the role itself. And that's a really key point, because we do tend to lead with our roles. We tend to lead with our resumes like that's our brand, and it's not, or that's our contribution, and it's not. Well, I really want to thank you for your time and attention. I know how hard it is to get away from work and come to something like this. So thank you for your time. I hope this was useful for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.